You're listening to Gen XP. Let's play some games. Welcome to episode 1 of the Shattered World of Voar, our long-format Dungeons & Dragons game set in an original world of floating islands, airships, and gods that walk among mortals. We'll be using the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition rules with a heavy sprinkling of house rules that I will do my very best to explain as we play. Our Dungeon Master on this journey will be Guy. Our players are Alan as the Fairy Rogue, Theric Wynn, and Ryan as the Half-Elf Rogue, Avaleth Silvergren. New episodes will be posted weekly, mixed with episodes where we look back and discuss what might have been, what was, and a random mix of off-topic shenanigans. We hope you enjoy this journey with us, and please feel free to reach out with questions and comments. Once again, welcome to episode 1, The Visitors in the Orchard. We open on the island of Nova Sona, a floating island high in the sky, surrounded by clouds. This is the world of Voar, shattered long ago when the land of the gods crashed to the planet. The sun is shining, and it is the middle of summer in the semi-tropical nation of Nova Sona. High above in the bright blue sky, we can see the glimmering white rocks that form the Belt of El, an asteroid belt that is visible day and night throughout the world of Voar. But as we zoom in on the island, we see the actual city of Nova Sona, capped very proudly by a tall castle on a high cliff that is near the drop-off into the open air. High towers with banners. The city surrounds it, and you see bustling trade. There are people moving here and there. There's little swirls of smoke that get lost in the wind. There's the ever-present cry of different birds that zoom in and out near the edges of these islands. The city is framed by a strong white wall with 4 towers, and beyond the city there is sprawling farmland, a number of houses, barns. There's little dirt paths that kind of wind and curl over the roads. You see the very busy farmers out there in the middle of the day tending to their crops. You see small livestock and a few even the size of cows, though those are rare here in this world of Nova Sona. I'm sorry, in the world of Voar. We zoom in on an apple orchard on the west bank of the city. Just row after row after row of apple trees. There are crates here and there where the people that work in the orchards will collect either the apples on certain days or store their tools on others. There's a old wagon that is not hooked to a beast of burden and just lies at an angle sitting in the shade of some of the trees. And then as we push further away from the city towards the far end of the shadowed orchard, we see a small shanty that is normally used for storing tools, much like the other ones, but inside this shanty there is there must be some sort of a small fire, because there's a small curl of smoke coming out of there. This is the place where Theric Wynn has been staying, at least for the last couple of days. You move around a lot, but the farmer that owns this orchard has given you permission, when you choose to stay in this shanty or this shack, at least to keep dry during the rainy times, because this is a semi-tropical area, so the rains do come on a regular basis. But you've been staying there for only a few days. Can you tell us, Theric, what do we see? What is Theric doing in his makeshift shack? He's only been here for a few days. What is he doing?
So Theric is a fairy. He stands about 3 foot 1 inch tall and weighs a meager 32 pounds. He has green eyes and brown hair with a greenish tint to it. At a distance, he looks like a small elf or an elven child, or if he's not wearing his hood, or he sometimes tries to pass himself off as a halfling. He has a cloak that's a purplish and blue that clashes with his green and brown clothes, but he uses it to help camouflage the wings on his back and pass himself off as not a fairy, but a small elf or a halfling. He generally doesn't fly or use his ability unless he thinks nobody's paying attention. And he constantly has the smell of freshly turned earth around him, and it comes from, it's a fae thing, but he figures it comes from the fact that he's usually out in the woods. He's been a hermit for the last 6 years, living off the land, living as a hermit, surviving, using his herbalism skills to get what little money he can, and he's spent a lot of time there. He's a little bit dirty, but not like grimy dirty, like he's been working out in the forest and turning the earth or hunting for herbs for the day. And he just got back from his morning trip out into the forest to try and get some herbs to sell at market, and he has he can't shake the feeling that he saw his friend yesterday, and he's really starting to think that he probably really should see if it really was him, and if so, if they can reconnect, because it's been years and he's been alone for so long that he hasn't had anybody to talk to or trust in a long time.
Great. Okay. So right now you're preparing, or just kind of cleaning and taking care of the your daily harvest.
Yep.
And out of curiosity, what do you have? Like your wings, are they like insect wings? Are they bird wings? Are they bat wings? What kind?
They're
of
more
wings?
insect or butterfly-ish type wings.
Okay. All right. Great. So, Theric, you're there in your small shack, and you've got a small fire that you probably use to dry some of the herbs every once in a while, wherever you happen to be. And you've got your bedroll laid out. You're using you have like a small knife that you're using to pare down the herbs, to cut away, the parts that you don't need. You're just processing your livelihood. You've been living kind of day to day for the most part since you've been here, and that thought that you mentioned of seeing your friend Avo is prevalent in your mind. But about an hour into your preparation process, as you're starting to think, well, you're nearing the end of this, you start to hear a little bit of, not commotion, but there's movement outside, and right now is not harvest time yet, so there's somebody nearing your where you're resting, and you can hear kind of very familiar clumsy footfalls, and you recognize, even without going out, that Old Man Diggle, who is the groundskeeper for the orchard, is coming towards the shack. He's friendly to you. He's never been anything other than friendly to you, but you're not sure why he's on his way towards you.
So I complete the task that I'm doing. I finish up and pack up the herbs quickly, get them ready for market, and then I go to the door or look out. Pull the flap, because I assume it's more of like a blanket flap. There really is no permanent door or anything.
Correct.
And I just pull up the flap and I look down the road and see if I see.
And you see a very portly halfling, no shoes. He wears, even for a halfling, he doesn't wear full length pants. They're shorts. And he's got a t-shirt he's got a short sleeve shirt that has not been able to button for years based on his gut. He's got very silvery gray hair and long mutton chops, but he's walking along. He's got his slingshot in his hand. You know that he often will try to chase away pests from the orchard with his slingshot, but he was walking and he sees you as you poke your head out, and he kind of waves a stubby-fingered little hand at you, and he says, "Oh, Mr. Theric, I was hoping to catch you at home today. My knees are bothering me something fierce with the arthritis, and I was wondering if you had anything a tea or a tincture of some sort that could help me."
I assume that I might have a clue with my herbalism skills, so I'm I say, well, yes, Diggle?
Yeah, you know him as Old Man Diggle, but he doesn't introduce himself as Old Man Diggle, but he clearly is.
Groundskeeper Diggle.
Yeah.
Yes, by all means. I glance around, realize I really don't have room for a fire, and I'm like, we could build a small fire there and make you a tea if you wish.
Oh, that'd be fine. Yes, there's the branches are clear enough here. We keep everything pretty well trimmed. So he says, I'll start gathering some firewood, and you see him at a very sedate pace heading out towards some of the brush to start gathering some wood for a fire. And you've got some herbalism supplies. You know that what you can do as far as a tea goes. But he, over the next few minutes, gathers enough for a very small fire and comes and kind of sits down with a heavy thump outside the shack and starting a small fire. He's got a little whetstone. He's like...
I just wave my hand over the fire and catch.
Okay, so you wave your hand over the fire. Is this like a prestidigitation?
Druidcraft.
Druidcraft, okay. So he says, oh, that's marvelous. It would save me some time with the whetstone, and I'd seen better days. And he puts it back in his pouch. And he says, so, any good business at the Bramble lately?
Some. Not a lot. I've been, getting by. As I make the poultice, I'm like, yes, do you know, where the Dawning Gardens, where I can find an easy way, or is there a guide or somebody who knows?
Oh, the temple. The temple is it's up in the cliffside. You can't really miss it. It's a big white building with trees sticking out of the middle of it. I've been there to do make a donation in the winter solstice, but as far as an entrance, they have there's a big large gate there at the front that allows people in. They do have usually someone staffed or stationed there, much like myself taking care of the orchard. That person takes care of the temple. You could ask there. As far as a guide goes, I can't say that folk like myself have spent a lot of time in the temple.
Well, thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
Brew his tea and get his herbs ready, and when it's steeping, I mix the tea, hand him a warm cup.
Okay. He takes it and he says, I thank you, Mr. Theric. I thank you. Why don't you give me, let's do so with tool proficiencies, herbalism is considered a tool proficiency, okay? With tool proficiencies, there's not a set attribute that is attached to a tool proficiency, okay? So we can discuss it, but it sounds to me like you're either using intelligence or wisdom to try to do something. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it says, what I read is most tools are with intelligence based because, and it is debatable, but they say most of the time when you make a skill check on a tool, it's an intelligence based check.
Right. Though, yeah, there are some exceptions like blacksmithing or lockpicking. Those are going to be different attributes, but you can use a variety, and I can always see a reason why you could say, well, I want to use this attribute this time instead because... and there might be some leeway. Like, it'd be hard to say, I'm going to use herbalism with charisma.
But I'm going to. I'm going
to use everything with charisma.
Right. So, why don't you give me an herbalism check to see how good this tea turns out.
Okay, so I'm going to use my intelligence.
Okay.
Which would give me a +3.
Okay. Would it also use your proficiency bonus?
It's not going to matter. I'm starting off like a champ, so that will be isn't your proficiency bonus?
Right now it's 2.
2, right? Okay,
yeah.
Yep. So I got 7.
Okay, a 7. So he takes the cup, and I'm pantomime this here for a moment. He takes the cup, he takes a small sip, he blows on it for a second, he says, oh, it's quite warm. Takes a sip, and you see his face kind of screw up, and he's like, oh, it's sour. Is it meant to be so sour, Mr. Theric?
I just nod my head, yes. Unfortunately, not all remedies taste good.
Well, that's the truth. When I was a wee lad, my mother always had me with the castor oil, and that tasted like the devil.
Oh, I hope that tastes better than castor oil, but maybe not.
He takes another sip, and again, his face kind of screws up. And he after that sip, Theric, you see him, like, kind of looks at it, and he goes, I think I'm feeling slightly better. I thank you for your time. And then he goes, I see you've been staying at the at the shack, and then he tosses the drink over his shoulder when he thinks you're not looking.
It's not going to help very long since you wasted it. Would you like me to make you another?
Yeah, well, could you make me perhaps a powder? I could mix it at home. I must be going. I've got duties to attend
yes,
to.
we can do that. And I mix him up a packet of the herbs.
Hey, I thank you. I thank you. I'll be passing this way in 2 days. If you're still here, I'll let you know how my arthritis is doing. And then he kind of very slowly, with a little bit of pain, climbs to his feet and kind of claps you on the shoulder. He's probably about the same height as you, though he weighs at least 4 times what you do. And then he says, well, a good day to you, Mr. Theric. And then he kind of starts heading off into the orchard. And you watch him kind of move away. And I think there's a moment where Theric probably looks at the ground where he tossed the tea out. And you think, well, you can do better than that. And it'll just take some practice. What would Theric be thinking at that time?
I got other things to do. And
speaking of other things to do, as Old Man Diggle rounds one of the orchard rows and is lost to sight now, probably 50, 60 yards away, as you were watching him and a little bit lost in thought, you hear a crack of wood from the back of the shed, where you know that you usually can find dry firewood, but something cracks and then there's a tumble and a crash.
I go around my little shack and look to see if I see anything behind me.
As you move around the shack, the first thing you see are booted feet, human-sized, very dirty leather boots that have seen better days, sticking out from underneath a pile of not heavy firewood. These are small sticks and whatnot that are piled behind here, but somebody has fallen and pulled the wood pile down on top of themselves. And other than Old Man Diggle and any workers that would be in the orchard, it's very unusual to see people out here. But there are very dirty booted feet sticking out from underneath a pile of wood, and you hear just like a low groan.
I cautiously approach the groan.
So you're starting to be able to pick out in the dim light underneath the branches of the orchard and the surrounding woods, that you see like a hand sticking out. It's actually missing its ring finger from about the second knuckle up, and that looks like it's a fresh. Not when I say fresh, it looks like it's happened within the last month. It's still an open-ish wound, dirty. You see part of a head sticking out underneath the wood, also just covered in dirt and now twigs and bark and whatnot. But whatever this person is, he doesn't seem to be moving. He's not seeming to be helping himself out from underneath the wood.
I find like a longer branch and I pick it up and I poke him. You there?
Yeah.
Hey.
There's a small and then he is unresponsive. You think that it's very possible that he might be unconscious based on the lack of movement or reaction to getting poked with a stick.
And I'll cautiously approach him and use my medicine skill to see if I can.
So you start pulling stuff. You start pulling stuff off of him so you can get a better look at him. Now this is a dwarf. In fact, it's not a human. He's got very large feet for a dwarf, but after you've uncovered a little bit more, you can see more of his face. He's got the big blocky nose, kind of furrowed brow, but this is a dwarf in the roughest condition you've ever seen a living person. He's got weeks of road grime. He's got open wounds from possible animal attacks. He's got like every part of his skin that you can see has been scratched, and there's abrasions everywhere. And he is actively bleeding from looks like an animal bite on his shoulder, a large animal bite. But he's unconscious. You can use your medicine skill if you'd like.
I glance around looking for where this combat took place.
Actually, all of these wounds don't look fresh. These look like things that have been afflicted upon this person for some time, and it looks like the last bit of his strength was Beyond your shack where you're at now, to the south, is for the most part wilds. So whoever this person is has stumbled out of the wilds and into the back of this shack.
Gotcha.
But he is bleeding, and it looks like if you were to do nothing, he will pass.
I'll use medicine to try and bandage him up.
Okay. It's a DC 15 medicine check to try to stabilize him. So do you want to describe a little bit about what you would do?
So I'll take in the situation and then start rummaging through my pack looking for bandages or, if he needs a splint or something to kind of stop the bleeding. Maybe wrap his head, wrap that bite, and just try and, while I'm doing it, I'll also see if I can move him out of the wood pile without causing him any more pain.
Okay. Yep.
To get him on flat ground.
Sounds good.
12.
Okay, a 12. So you work furiously trying to staunch the bleeding. That shoulder wound is his definite. That's the most dangerous thing for him. The numerous abrasions, scratches, the missing finger, those things are not what is killing him right now. He's bleeding from that shoulder wound, and with a 12, you work hard to try to save this dwarf's life for about a good 3 or 4 minutes, and it's not enough. And you can feel him slipping. He's getting colder to the touch. The blood is starting to slow as it's leaving his body. I'd let you make one more check if you wanted to try to do something else. If you wanted to you've used medicine, and that didn't quite work. I could see you using herbalism if you wanted to try that, or if you don't have any magical skills that can help with this. I don't believe.
No.
Okay.
I currently have 0 magical skills whatsoever.
Okay.
Wow, I was a druid crap.
I was about to say, start a fire.
If you wanted to try to use herbalism, I could give you a second chance. It'll be a slightly higher DC now.
I'll try with herbalism.
It's going to be a 17 DC.
Okay.
And don't forget, and it's very early in the game, but I gave everybody inspiration tokens if this is something you want to use. But again, very early in the game. It's up to you what you do.
So on the inspiration tokens, just to clarify and make sure I remember, if we use them, we lose them. We don't get one at the beginning of every session, right?
Yep. So our inspiration tokens are going to burn away at the end of the session. I give everybody a brand new one every session, and then you can earn more by basically role playing. If you play your character well, you can earn more.
Before I make my decision, I want to look over this character to see this dwarf and see if there's any take a quick glance, see if there's any symbols, any medallions, anything that might help me identify where he's from.
Okay. Give me an investigation check, since this is something that is happening in a quick time, because you have a short amount of time.
18.
All right. After a few moments, you
17, I'm sorry.
You do find a symbol to Grace, the goddess Grace. It's actually tattooed on his inner arm, in his inner forearm. Beyond that, he has a pouch with what looked like it had rations in it at one point. It's just crumbs left. He has a sheath on his side that at one point held a dagger that he no longer owns, or is not near him. And you can tell from your investigation of 18 as well that the way his shirt is a different color stain in certain spots. He at one point had a backpack, but doesn't have it anymore. He is as much of a refugee or a in trouble person, a lost person as he could possibly be at this moment.
So if I use my inspiration, I can roll with advantage, right?
Correct. The way we're using inspiration in this game is you can either roll with advantage, or if you roll and don't like what you got, you can trade it in and roll again, but take the second roll, no matter what it is.
I'm going to roll normally.
Okay.
While Theric doesn't want this dwarf to die,
Mm-hmm.
he really doesn't. He doesn't know the dwarf at the same time, and it's not like he's a doctor or anything.
Correct.
So he's doing the best he can to make this person live, to help this person live. So we will roll normally.
Okay.
Herbalism. So that's a 16 or 17.
That's a 17. That's the DC. So you quickly scavenge in your herbalism pouch. You find a few herbs that are going to be enough to make bleeding stop, and just pack the wound with them. And then I think probably a good 10 minutes has to go by before you realize, did it work? It takes some time. His breathing gets very shallow. But eventually, after about 10 minutes, you realize, okay, the bleeding has stopped. He's still breathing. He's very pale, he's very weak, and he's very unconscious. And you're sitting there. I think that at this point, Theric would be, your hands and probably most of your forearms, maybe some of your knees have blood on them, or dirt at the very least. And you're sitting there on the ground next to a unconscious, very badly injured dwarf.
I look at the dwarf, trying to figure out how much he weighs. Look for maybe something to build a...
Like a sled?
There you go. A sled or a, stretcher, yeah.
Or a gurney. You would guess, if you had to take a wild guess, just looking at the dwarf, he's malnourished, which will help a little bit. So he probably only weighs about 180 pounds. You think that before he lost a lot of weight and spent however much time he did lost, he probably weighed a bit more than that.
I need to make makeshift gurney to drag him to the gates.
Sure. I think that it's very easy to imagine that you could pull the tarp off the door. Yep. That would be the easiest thing for you to do.
And a couple long sticks and tighten it. Make it nice and tight. If you need me to make a check, I can. But
no, I think this is simple enough workmanship. You're not trying to build something of lasting value. You just roll him onto this thing, and then it's probably going to take you a good half an hour of dragging to get him to where there are people other than in this orchard.
So it probably took me a good 20 minutes to make the gurney and then to work him on, because I don't want to roll him on there because I don't want him to be face first on the,
Right.
So I got to work him on there a little bit. A good hour or two has gone by since your first encounter with this person, and you've spent the last good half hour, maybe 45 minutes, just sweating and dragging him through the orchard. Past the orchard, there's a number of small farms, and those would be the closest place where you could find people. Do you want to take him there, or do you want to take him all the way to the city gates? I'm going to take him to the city gates. He has a symbol of grace, like a tattoo, so I'm going to connect or assume that he's somehow connected to the Temple of Grace, and that's where I think he needs to go.
Okay.
Because you don't just get a tattoo of a goddess if you just, maybe he was drunk and decided to get an ink down his arm, but generally that's not the case. So.
Right. So he doesn't make any. He's so far. He is in such dire condition. He makes no noises, even when you roll him onto the gurney. He's no longer even groaning, but he is breathing. You've done enough to stabilize him, and if he can find somebody that is either going to give him a place to be for a while and care for him, or magical help, he will survive.
And I'm going as slow as I can so that I don't go over any big rocks or anything that might actually cause him some injury again, or reopen the shoulder wound that I spent so much time trying to close.
It is nearing dusk. This was the middle of the day when you first were talking to Old Man Diggle. It is nearing dusk by the time you get to the city gates. The city of Nova Sona has two gates. The closest to you was the western gate, but it still takes you until just about dusk. At dusk, as you pull up to these gates, now these gates, Nova Sona is a peaceful nation. It is farmland, it is mercantile. They have no warring enemies on this island, so they do not shut the gates at night. The gates are more there for when the city was first founded a couple hundred years ago, to keep the people inside of it safe from any wilds out there. But the gates are open. There is a member of the Queen's Hand, which is the city guard, that is stationed there. They wear red tabards and typically carry halberds as part of their station. But there is one person there from the city guard, the Queen's Hand, and he sees you coming up. And the Queen's Hand are typically trying to be helpful. So when he sees a small person dragging a dwarf, he does move out away from his post, and he says, what's going on here? What happened?
I kind of shrug my shoulders and I was sitting nice and comfy in my little hut, And I heard a commotion behind, and lo and behold, a dwarf was there.
So the guard kneels down next to the dwarf and checks for a pulse, sees that he's alive. He's like, he's barely alive. What's this? Is that something that you've packed the wound with? You saved his life?
As best I could.
Well, I can get him to the temple to see if they can do some healing or possibly at least.
I'll help you.
He kind of looks you up and down, and you see a wry smile. This person stands about 6 foot tall. He's like, all right, why don't you, it's getting dark, and he takes a lantern off of the pole next to where he was stationed. He says, why don't you carry this and light my way? And he picks up the sled for you, and then starts...
I take the lantern and skip next to him.
Okay. He drags luckily, the east or the western gate enters cliffside. That's where you need to be anyways. It's the closest gate to the Dawning Garden Temple, which as you pass through the gate, you can see it is the largest building in this district. The only thing that rivals it are the walls and the castle of the Royal District that are beyond. Nova Sona is built on an incline with cliffside and the Royal District higher than the rest of it. So you look down, you've been in the city a number of times, but it's always a little bit of just a jarring experience, being a hermit for as long as you have been, and even now living by yourself. Being in a populated area always feels a little bit disjointed, but
yep.
He helps you very quickly along, or you help him very quickly along to the gates of the Dawning Garden. Large white marbled walls with a big arched gate, and you see a simple cleric in white robes, a female human woman that is she's stationed at the gates with she's got a torch, not a torch, she's got a lantern as well, and as you arrive she says, is something befallen this man? And the guard says, this young fellow, little fellow, yeah, this fellow found this dwarf out in the woods, he said, and packed the wound, and he needs assistance. And the cleric is like, we'll take care of it right away. And she says, you've done a good deed,
Is there a
sir.
visible symbol?
She is wearing a symbol of grace. Yeah.
I say if you'll check his right wrist, you'll see a symbol that matches yours.
She pulls his shirt up and she says, he may be one of the devotees then. But regardless, it matters not if he is a follower of grace. Of course, we are happy to help. You've done a good deed, sir. Do you require anything? We can provide you with some soup or some bread, or I can give you a place to sit and rest until you wanted to head home.
Well, I'd definitely like to sit and rest, but I also, I'm wondering, do you have, and I glance around now, this place, is it all the different churches? Is it?
So what this is, to describe this further, there is a large white wall that rings this complex of buildings. And it looks like 4 large buildings inside they're connected. They're not walls between them. They're clearly wings between the 4 large buildings. And you can see trees growing out of the middle of whatever this square of buildings is. There are symbols to the gods of good inside, or on some of the buildings themselves.
Well, I just want to know. So really, I'm just trying to get a lay of the land, and just to see if she would know Avaleth Silvergrin, or Avaleth. I'm sorry, Silvergrin or not. And I kind of say I'm looking for somebody. I think. Again, I think it's been a long time since I've seen them. Might you have somebody in this compound that goes by the name of Avaleth Silvergrin?
She actually, while you're talking, she rings a wooden clacker, just like a and you see a light appear. The wall itself separates the buildings only maybe 30 or 40 feet, but a light appears, and then you see 3 or 4 people coming out. Looks like a couple elves and a human and a dwarf. But they're kind of rush out, and as they're coming, she's listening to you, and she says, "There's a person here in need of help." And she's pointing at the dwarf. She says, "Avaleth, Avaleth. I think I do know that name. I think he works as an acolyte. doing routine tasks around the temple, research, and sometimes working in the Grand Librium, which is...
Then I would like somebody to find him if possible for my reward.
The acolyte would have your reward. Would it be
No. Finding the acolyte is my reward.
Oh, I see. Well, it could be arranged. It is late today. Would it be possible for you to return in the morning?
I kind of look around and I'm like, I guess. It's a long walk home, though.
She presses a gold coin into your hand and she says, "For your time and trouble and for being a good citizen, I would stop and get something to eat on the way home."
I shake her hand. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome, and greatest blessings upon you.
When should I return tomorrow?
The temple is open to the public at first light. So anytime beyond that.
I nod my head. Walk out of the compound.
Okay. And you find yourself, the guard that originally brought the dwarf and you here, once he realized that the temple had it underhand, he kind of clapped you on the shoulder and he says, "Good lad," and then he walked off into the dark. The temple, she goes back to her post. The group of them pick him up in a very gentle fashion and ferry him inside. Now you're not, there's no physical bar to your entry. It's just that she's explained that because it's getting dark, that the temple is not accepting visitors at this time.
And I want to go find like the closest fountain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. I'll respect their wishes.
In this part of town, there are a number of decorative fountains.
And that go find the closest one and try and clean up some of this blood off me.
Yeah. So the architecture here is a beautiful thing to see as far as Cliffside goes. There are tall houses, there are fountains, there are private gardens. Most of the buildings that are built to look like they're made of stone are actually petrified mushroom bricks. You know that in this world, and you're not from this world, but it's something that you've adapted to since you've been here, is that most of this world is extremely eco-conscious because they have limited resources, so they build out of renewable resources as much as possible. So you find yourself at a mushroom brick fountain, a three-tiered design that has a depiction of the goddess Rebellion at the top, and the fountain actually is her hair as the water shoots out and it forms her hair. But you just take a moment.
As I get there, I look at "Ma'am," and then I start to clean myself.
Okay. You take a few moments, and the water washes the dirt and the grime off of you, and you feel better, cleaner, and you think that at least now, tomorrow, you have a path towards seeing your friend again.
Well, and so for the night, my plan is to look around and find the nearest building with a flat roof.
Okay.
And make my way towards it and look around, and if nobody's looking, fly up to the roof and put my...
Quick question for you. Considering the situation, is it possible that you left some of your belongings at the shack, considering that you were working on the dwarf?
Yeah, I mean, I might not have my blanket,
okay,
but that's okay.
All right.
I have my cloak, I have my clothes.
Okay. It doesn't take long, but
I'm used to not having much, so...
Sure.
Really, the blanket's about the only thing that I don't have on me at all times.
Okay. It doesn't take long. In fact, I think that they did give you... Let me just back up a half second. When they picked up the dwarf and took him, they did hand you the blanket back that you brought him here on. So you've got that blanket.
I've got a wet blanket, since I tried to wash it as much as I could to get the blood out.
Yeah. So when you were washing it to get the blood out, okay, that blanket, you scrubbing at one spot, and you had folded it a number of times and had the sticks set up. The sticks are no longer necessary, so I imagine you probably pull those out. And as you do, one of the folds that was near his arms, because his arms were at his sides and the sticks were trying to support his weight, something falls out with like a wet thump and hits the ground.
Look down.
There is a wad of paper that falls out. It's a little bit stained with blood and a little bit with water, but it falls out with a wet thump, and you can see markings on it.
I kind of slowly try to spread it out, just without ripping it.
Okay. Yep. So upon spreading the paper out, It's a thicker parchment that has survived all of the trials of whoever that person was. But on the parchment, you find what looks to be part of a map, and then on the other side, also part of a map. One is a more overland view, and the other looks to be an interior of what you would call maybe a dungeon.
Interesting. I have to fold it up. Put it
Okay.
in my pouch. I'll have to return this to fine gentleman when I see him.
Okay. After that, you take a few moments, look around, and are trying to find a flatter roof to spend the night on?
Just to get a few hours of sleep.
Okay. And are you trying to do this sneaky? Like, are you trying to get up there without anybody seeing you?
Yeah.
Give me a stealth check.
24.
Yeah. With very little effort, you manage to slip into some shadows, take a look around. The city being as safe as it is doesn't mean that it folds up at nighttime, and it was only just after dusk, so there are a number of people out there, but you are confident that no one sees you as you pull your cloak to the side and just very quickly, with a few quick buzzes of your wings, fly up to the top of the building with a very flat roof. It looks like the flat roof on this overlooks an internal private garden of another residence. But you have a place to sleep that will be...
I just lay out the wet blanket and then sit next to it and get it comfortable as possible, and try to get a night's sleep because I want to be out before everybody so I can fly down without somebody seeing me.
Sure. Your night passes uneventfully. It's warm here, so you're no need for a fire or anything like that, and you've had more than enough exercise. But you pass the night uneventfully, and as dawn is approaching, as the sky is starting to get lighter, I think that your eyes flutter open, because you're not sleeping in the most comfortable place, so even though you pass the night uneventfully, it's not in great comfort. But you wake up and kind of stretch the soreness out of your muscles. There are very few people in the streets at the crack of dawn. Most of the activity in Nova Sona at this time is outside the city walls and the farms and the orchards.
And I fold up the blanket and I'll jump off. How high up am I? About 20 feet?
I'd say 20 to 30 feet. This is a nice house in this district, so.
And I'll just drop, but right before I hit, I'll use my wings to slow my descent a little bit.
Okay. Yep. No one's looking right now, so you drop off and land quietly next to the building, and then your cloak comes back around to disguise your wings. And are you making your way back to the Dawning Garden?
Yep, make my way back to the Dawning Garden.
As the sun is rising, you hear a bell tone from inside the temple, which they ring every morning to welcome the dawn. And you see a different person. This is a halfling man, also in the white robes of simple service that don't denote any specific god, but just that he's in service to this temple. But as you approach, he kind of greets you and he says, "Light's greetings to you, sir. What can I help you with?"
I'm looking for... I was here last night. Brought in a dwarf.
"Oh, yes. The sister did mention that you'd be coming back to speak with Acolyte Avaleth."
I just shake my head. If he's around, if it is him.
We do have an acolyte by the name of Avaleth. I believe today he's stationed in the library. Follow me. And he actually whistles, and another person takes his spot.
And as we start, did the dwarf survive the night?
I'm not positive on that. We could check at the infirmary if you'd like to head there first.
By there first.
Well, let's head that way. And he as soon as he steps into the main building, he kind of diverts over to the right hand side. You enter the temple proper and take a right towards one of the square buildings that makes up one of the four corners. And the halfling that's guiding you says, "Well, it's right down this way to the infirmary. Let's check and see how your friend was doing. Is it somebody that you've known for a while?"
I shake my head. I have no idea who he is.
"Oh, you were just doing your part as a good citizen then."
Sure.
Well, that's very nice of you. He pushes through a double door and leads you down a side hallway. Everything in the Dawning Garden temple is immaculately clean. There is carvings on all of the columns. Most of the ceilings are... You notice that there are a large number of magical lights that just kind of hover near the ceilings, different colors. And you can smell fresh flowers and the small amount of incense kind of everywhere in the building. On the inside of the building, so like as you entered the building, on your left is the interior of the complex, and that looks like it's an open-air garden with a number of trees, but also just huge amounts of bushes, flowers, climbing vines. It's a place of nature in the center of the building.
Must be that's where I should have came and got my herbs.
Oh, we do have a number of good herbs in there. The temple harvests them and provides them to the people of Nova Sona as much as possible. But it's right this way, and he pushes through one last set of doors, and you see a modest infirmary with a number of beds. The only one that is occupied at the moment is the dwarf that you brought here yesterday, who looks like he has survived the night. He's heavily bandaged. He's been washed head to toe. He's been stripped of his normal clothing, and he's just wearing like a white shift. But he's unconscious, and there is a human woman that is kind of dabbing at his head with a rag. But she looks up and she says, "Oh, hello, brother." And she talks to the halfling, and she says, "And hello to you. Are you here to visit?"
I just want to know if he lived through the night.
He's doing all right. Yes.
Dropped in on me unexpectedly.
Right, he's doing all right. He did gain consciousness slightly during the middle of the night, but was raving. He doesn't seem coherent yet. We're not sure if whatever the damage was caused to him from the different sources. He had a number of wounds. Whatever caused that, there may be some further complications beyond the physical. We're not sure if there was some poisons or some toxins in general that he might have either ingested or been injected. But we're doing our best to take care of him.
I'm not. Okay. Maybe I'll check back on him in a day or two.
Well, it's very nice of you. And at which point the halfling that is with you, he says, "Well, it's right this way. I can show you to the Grand Leave Room." This has been Gen XP. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.